Shambho, 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 Shambho. Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya, Shivaya Namah. Har Har Mahadeva, Har Har Mahadeva, Har Har Mahadeva, Har Har Mahadeva. Shambho Shankar Uma Maheshwar Gauri Priya Sadashiva. Namaste astu Bhagavan Vishveshwaraya Mahadevaya Trambhakaya Tripurantakaya Trikagnikalaya Kalagnirudraya Nīla-kantāya. Namah Parvati-pataye. Har Har Mahadev. Tatpurushaya vidmahe Mahadevaya dhimahi Tanna Rudra prachodayat. Trambakam yajamahe sugandhim pushtivardhanam Advarukamiva vandanan Mrityurmukshiyamamrutat. Namaskaram, vasanthi-mā Swami Devame. This is the second composition of Sri śuddhā-nanda bhārati that you are singing for us. You had in fact started off with Sakala Kala Vaniye, composed by Sri śuddhā-nanda bhārati in Kedaram rāgam, as one of the two songs for the launch of your YouTube channel 3.5 months ago on October the 24th, 2020. In just a quarter, you have blessed us with a quarter century of songs of as many as 18 composers, all of whom I listed out in last week's video. Today's song, on the other hand, was the very first song sung impromptu by its prodigious little composer when he was a precocious 8-year-old child, gracefully blessed with a gift for poetry and words right after his dhyana at the Chidambaram Nataraja temple. He is said to have spontaneously burst into this very song, eppaDi pāDinarO, thus jump-starting a 85-year-long literary and spiritual career from the age of 8 to 93, some say 97, equivalent in scale to the Hindustani raga Bhimpalas, karnāTaka dévagāndhāri. True to its name, is a dramatic and devotionally engulfing raga, best suited for poetic exaggeration and heartfelt pleas, broadening our perceptive horizons all the way from our state, Karnātaka, to the land of Kandahar, in Afghanistan, ironically elevating our spirits to the depth of a black hole, as you shall realize when vasanthi-mā pours it out soul-stirringly. The paradox of elevating to the depth. Elevating to the depth. This paradox is still logically permissible, as no one ever knows which side of a black hole is up or down, as such relativistic directions are meaningless in this and many other contexts, such as Vaikuntha, Jannat, heaven, and hell. Yes, Karnātaka is both literally and figuratively, etymologically and metaphorically, an elevated land with shores nonetheless, but with black soil. Karu is black, and Nadu is an elevated land, Karunādu, Karnātaka. And so is the land of the Pathans and Gandhari. Kandahar, Afghanistan. The legendary singer Srimati D.K. Pattammal popularized the same song which vasanthi-mā is gifting for us today by singing it in almost all her houseful concerts. Other popular songs in Karnātaka dévagāndhāri include Palukute Nelatalli by Annamacharya and Panchashata Pita Rupini by our favorite Mudduswami Dikshita. Adiyar Padum Idar with Adi-tāLam by Kovai Subri. Anbulla Karpagame, again Adi-tāLam by the same composer as of today, śuddhā-nanda bhārati. Chinna Kaiyai, again in Adi-tāLam by Raji Krishnan. Murayittu Panmurai, Adi-tāLam, Kovai Subri, and all others. Most of the songs in the Karnātaka dévagāndhāri are in Adi-tāLam. Samasati by K. Ramaraj, who also wrote another song in the same rāgam, Venkata Girivasa, and our own Purandaradasa's Yadava Niba. That's as far as the mom or melody or rāgam goes. The dad or rhythm or layam for today's song is Adi-tāLam, as you would have guessed already. Every child is created not only through dad and mom, but also a soul, the primary ingredient. So is a song. It needs a soul. Hence, the next pit stop in the discourse for us after rāgam and tāLam, as always, is the soul or lyrics or sahityam. And that requires us to know a bit about the composer-singer too. Kavi-yogi maha-rśi Shri śuddhā-nanda bhārati, SNB, śuddhā-nanda bhārati, for short SNB, who according to the second amongst hundreds of gurus in my own life, Sri Swami Chidanandaji Maharaj of the Divine Life Society, publisher of our Lyricist of the Day's book, Veda Sadhanam, a scripture of universal Hinduism, Sanatana Dharma, eternal righteousness. Yogi śuddhā-nanda bhārati was kind enough to compile this great work for the good of humanity, which speaks only English or reads only English, unfortunately, including me. A born saint dedicated to the spiritual service of humanity, like Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. Śuddhā-nanda Bhārati also practically lived through all major religions in different phases of his life and all systems of yogas, and he was a radiating center of yoga Shakti, integrating them into not Sankhya Yoga as usual, which I prefer, but into Sama Yoga, or the yoga of equality. A little more about that later. He had widely studied, widely traveled, and was recognized by savants as the apostle of one God, one world, and one humanity, and therefore the Sama Yoga, or equality. He was a pilgrim of eternity. His great epic of godmen, Bharata Shakti, consisting of 50,000 lines, was hailed by none other than the father of our nation, Sri Mohandas Karamchand Mahatma Gandhiji, as the modern Mahabharata. Śuddhā-nanda Bhārati lived in dynamic silence. Dynamic silence. Mauna can be dynamic too. And the best example of that is our own Dakshinamurti, another form of Nataraja. So Śuddhā-nanda Bhārati lived in dynamic silence at Sholapuram, Tapalayam, moving his pen to the rhythm of the divine inspiration in his soul. He could obviously do that because he had a 20-year practice of mauna, or silence, earlier in Aurobindo's ashram. Kavi-yogi maha-rśi Sri Śuddhā-nanda Bhārati's book, Veda Sadhanam, amongst literally thousands of other books, by the way, is a Divine Life Society publication. This particular book, Veda Sadhanam, blessed by great sages like Sri Aurobindo, Ramana Maharishi, Shivananda Saraswati, and Shirdi Sai Baba, all of whom he directly interacted with, because he lived for, remember, either 93 or 97 years, according to many people, stretching from the 19th century to the end of the 20th century. Veda Sadhanam, written by him, is a Bible, Quran, or Gita of Manava Dharma, and a guiding light to followers of the voice of ancient sages and seers, our rishis, and their yoga. It contains chosen gems from the Vedas, Upanishads, Gita, Brahma Sutras, Yoga Sutras, Ramayana, Mahabharata, our two Itihasas, Bhagavatam, the most popular Purana, from Shankara's hymns, and from the hymns of other inspired saints. So this book by Śuddhā-nanda Bhārati Ji, today's composer, is a treasure of wisdom, appealing to all seekers. Kavi-yogi Maharishi Sri Śuddhā-nanda Bhārati's book Veda Sadhanam is dedicated to the memory of my Parama Guru, His Holiness Sadguru Swami Shivanandaji Maharaj of Rishikesh, originally from Pattamadai, via Malaya as a Dr. Kuppuswamy from the Appaya Dikshitar Parampara. And Sadguru Swami Shivanandaji Maharaj is one whom Kavi-yogi Śuddhā-nanda adored as the emanation of divinity. There are lots of similarities between the rhythms and melodies of the songs of Shivananda and Śuddhā-nanda. They were boyhood friends, by the way. May all who study and follow the wisdom of ancient sages, treasured in Kavi-yogi Maharishi Sri Śuddhā-nanda Bhārati's book, Veda Sadhanam, attain peace, bliss, light, and energy, because these are the prerequisites before one can embark on a spiritual journey. By realizing the real in the human vesture itself. Hari-Om Tat Sat. The said book constitutes the gift of a great man to his contemporary human family and the future too, all the future generations. The actual authors of the contents of this book are the original Sanskrit rishis, our ancient sages of Prachina Bharatavarsha, the inestimable service rendered to us by Reverend śuddhā-nanda Bharati Maharaj is to delve into this ancient wisdom, make a compilation of its high points and translate it into English with explanatory notes added to it to bring out their inner meaning clearly to the seeker after wisdom. So saying, Pujya Sri Swami Chidanandaji Maharaj, my second guru after my grandfather, Sri Swami Sarvana Bhavanandaji Maharaj, Pujya Sri Swami Chidanandaji Maharaj recommends kavi-yogi maha-rśi Sri śuddhā-nanda Bharati's book, Veda Sadhanam, to all sincere seekers and earnest pursuers of knowledge and wisdom, wishing it to the wide circulation that it deserves. In the name of our beloved and late worshipful Maharishi, kavi-yogi śuddhā-nanda Bharati of Yoga Samaj Sholapuram Tapalayam in Tamil Nadu, Bharat, who is no more present. He passed away in 1990, attaining Mahasamadhi. Pujya Sri Swami Chidanandaji Maharaj was very glad to put into the hands of the reading public, English reading public that is, and especially spiritual seekers, this latest reprint of his well-known book, Veda Sadhanam. This is a rare work of the Vedantic vision and its practical living that we have inherited as our spiritual heritage. Bharat's ancient sages and seers who attained to the supreme living experience of the supracosmic primal being, Brahman, declared their vision and experience for the benefit of posterity, including us. In our own times, in this recent 20th century, the one which just passed, we were blessed by the presence of such a sage and a seer who appeared in this unbroken line of succession of spiritual masters to awaken mankind to the spiritual goal of life and enlighten the human world of the means of attaining the supreme goal, mukti, moksha, nirvana, whatever you may call it. Liberation from the cycle of birth and death. Pujya Sri Swami Chidanandaji Maharaj had the great fortune and blessedness of having personally met, known and imbibed wisdom from late worshipful Maharishi kavi-yogi śuddhā-nanda Bharati, the great person that Chidanandaji Maharaj is. Even though he is a Jivan Mukta himself, self-realized soul, he offers his pranams and prostrations to every soul who is capable of showing some inclination towards spirituality. In fact, he even fell at the feet apparently of the director of Upanishad Ganga, the serial, knowing that great service that Upanishad Ganga brought about to the knowledge of so many people who aren't even aware of Vedanta, the ultimate wisdom, not only of Sanatana Dharma and Bharat, but of the entire humanity and the universe. Śuddhā-nanda Bharati Ji was a boyhood friend of Pujya Sri Swami Shivananda Ji Maharaj, the holy master of Pujya Sri Swami Chidanandaji Maharaj himself. So revered Sri Śuddhā-nanda Bhārati Ji was an inspired poet, a great scholar and linguist, familiar with more than a dozen languages, including French and Latin. He was also a very great patriot with intense love for Bharatavarsha and hence a freedom fighter. Blazing in his heart was the love for Bharat. Pujya Sri Swami Chidanandaji Maharaj concludes his foreword with his own blessings. May his benedictions be upon all the readers of Veda Sadhanam of Śuddhā-nanda Bhārati Ji, a poet, thinker, writer, yogi, nationalist, bhakta, composer, scholar, and freedom fighter, the patriot maha-rśi, kavi-yogi Śuddhā-nanda Bhārati composed literally thousands of narrative poems and kritis in Tamil that were impassioned and sincere, though he was aware of many other languages like French, German, English, Sanskrit, and quite a few others. His stature was great, yet he praised other composers and those before him while he fought for Bharat's freedom and peace. He said, "May the curse of separatism abate, may our thoughts be lofty, our moral high, and may truth prevail everlastingly." I shall reveal his biography after the song and my Advaitic interpretations as always. Vasanthi-mā, all our years are yours now.
பொருள் உணர்ந்து உன்னையே ஆசை கொண்டே சிவனே எப்படி பாடினரோ. குருமணி சங்கரரும் அருமை தாயுமானவரும், குருமணி சங்கரரும் அருமை தாயுமானாரும், அருணகிரிநாதரும் அருள் ஜோதி வள்ளலும், குருமணி சங்கரரும் அருமை தாயுமானாரும், அருணகிரிநாதரும் அருள் ஜோதி வள்ளலும், கருணை கடல் பெருகி கருணை கடல் பெருகி காதலினால் உருகி, 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 கனி தமிழ் சொல்லினார் இனிதுனை anu-dhinam, கனி தமிழ் சொல்லினார் இனிதுனை anu-dhinam, எப்படி பாடினரோ அடியார் அப்படி பாடனா. ஆசை கொண்டே சிவனே எப்படி பாடினரோ, எப்படி பாடினரோ, எப்படி பாடினரோ. ஓ
Thanks, vasanthi-mā. Let's first explore an Advaitic interpretation of the wonderful song that you have just presented. In the Pallavi, you sang, "Eppadi pāDinarO, Tiruvadayar, appadi paada naan aashai kondeen Shivane." Songs are aesthetic expressions of vak, sound, word, to get absorbed in vak, which is the creation and the creator too. Vak is the creation and the creator too. So songs are aesthetic expressions of that vak, to get absorbed in vak. So I desire to sing of you, says śuddhā-nanda bhārati. O nothingness, I desire to sing of you. Appadi paada naan aashai kondeen. How? As sung by the respectable ones. And that's why the R at the end, AR, in Tamil means a respectable one. As sung by the respectable ones who get absorbed into you, the black hole. Everything, mind you, gets absorbed into the black hole. Some recognize it, some don't. That's the only difference. Adiyar, Adi, at the feet of the black hole, getting absorbed into it. That's what adiyar or devotees actually literally mean. Normally translated as devotees, I would like to see adiyar being more and more recognized as the respectable one who gets absorbed into you, the black hole, the nothingness. How did they sing, O nothingness? I too would like to sing like that. Nanum appadi paada aashai kondeen. I would like to sing like that joyfully and voluntarily, offering my finite sound or nada into the sound infinite nāda-brahman. That was the Pallavi. A very simple song, but containing deep philosophy. That's the secret of a great saint. In the Anu-Pallavi, Sri śuddhā-nanda Bharati Maharaj goes on to say, Apparum Sundararum Aaludai Pillayum Arulmani Vachagarum porul unarndhu unnaye eppaDi pāDinarO adiyar appadi paada naan aashai kondeen Shivane. So in this whole song, he refers to 8 great saints who are also singers and devotees as a sample case. And the first 4 are introduced in this Anu-Pallavi that I just recited the lyrics for. And the other 4 are in the Charanam, the main part of the song. So let's see how this distinction is made. The 4 here are the ones who are amongst the 63 Nayanmars, the great Shaivite saints, equivalent to the 12 or 12 Alvars of Vaishnavism or Vishnu Bhaktas. These are Shiva Bhaktas, the 63. There's no sacrosanct aspect about the 63 because there were many, many more than that. But this is just a sample. And out of that 63, 3 are very popular and called as the mover. And those are Appar, Sundarar and Sambandar, Tirunjana Sambandar, who is also known as Aaludai Pillayum, and which is why in this song we see Apparum Sundarum Aaludai Pillayum. And then there is a 4th one who is not considered amongst the 63 Nayanmars. Some people consider him as the 64th Nayanmar. That is Manikka-Vasagar. And that's why he says Arulmani Vachagarum. That's Manikka-Vachagar. So these 4 are always taken together when people remember great Shaivite saints. And the mover plus Manikka-Vasagar becomes the Nalvar. That is Appar, Sundarar, Sambandar and Manikka-Vasagar. A most important thing in this Anu-Pallavi is the last line, porul unarndhu unnaye eppaDi pāDinarO. It's not just singing, ordinary singing, but porul unarndhu unnaye eppaDi pāDinarO. And that's what is critical here. So as the great Tamil poet saints, Appar, also known as Tirunavukkarasar, Navu means nak or tongue. So Tirunavukkarasar means the Holy One who is the king of his tongue or the king of words. He lived between 580 to 660 in the Common Era, who perceived the Almighty, the ultimate divinity, as his boss and himself as the servant of that divinity. On the other hand, the second person mentioned in this song here in the Anu-Pallavi is Sundarar, meaning the most beautiful one. Appar is a term which was given to him by Sambandar, the third person that we will see. But Sundarar, unlike Appar who perceived God as his boss, Sundarar perceived God as his friend, like how Arjuna perceived Krishna as his friend. And then the third person here is the youngster, Aludai Pillai, and he also called as Pillayar, just like Ganesha. That is Thiru Jnana Sambandhar. Thiru meaning holy, Jnana meaning knowledge, and Sambandhar means one who has a relation with that divinity, who perceived God not as a boss or a friend like Appar and Sundarar, but as a parent. He became a child. He was a child, but he said that he was a child to the divinity itself. Having been fed by Mother Parvati, the bosom milk of wisdom, which is what did the magic of converting him from human to being human is super, that kind of superhumanity. Sambandhar was a contemporary of Appar, while Appar lived from 580 to 660 AD. Sambandhar lived from 640 to 656, so it's much younger than Appar, and lived only for about 16 years. He died 4 years before Appar. So Appar's lifetime was a superset of Sambandhar's lifetime, which was a subset. And finally, the fourth of the Nalvar who is mentioned in this song is Manikka Vasagar, a very famous minister to a king who spent all the money given by the king to buy horses on building temples and therefore got into trouble with the king, only to be eventually relieved by divinity itself. This Manikka Vasagar did not perceive God as boss or friend or parent, but as his Sadguru, and sang of Shiva, nothingness, with knowledge and wisdom, jnana, also of the truth of Brahman, the Paramasatya, and with understanding. So just as the saints Appar, Sundarar, Sambandhar and Manikka Vasagar sang of you, O my nothingness, my own nothingness, with full knowledge and understanding, porul unarndhu, that's the main thing here. Not just singing or praying. An invocation has to be done through a true understanding that that same divinity which is omnipresent is within us as well, because we are within the universe. So I too would like to sing like these four. Now in the Charanam, four more are introduced. Slightly more modern, but still about 1,000 years back. Gurumani Shankararum, Arumai Tayumanarum, Arunagiri-nādarum, Arujyoti Vallalum, karunai kadal perugi, kaadhalinaal urugi, kanni thamizh chollinaal, inidhunai anu-dhinam. So the four great people mentioned here are Adi Shankaracharya, Tayumanavar, Arunagiri-nādar, whose song vasanthi-mā sung for you earlier as Tirupugars, and Arujyoti Vallalum, referring to Vallalar, much more recent, and who lived just before śuddhā-nanda bhārati, the poet himself. But what is more important than these four great Mahan saints mentioned here is how they approached God. It says, karunai kadal perugi. That means an ocean of compassion expansively put out. Because remember, ya devi sarva bhuteshu matru-rupena samstita namastasyai 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 namo namaha means that, as I've said before, I am a mother to the entire universe, not from the obvious facts that I am loving, compassionate, etc., sharing. No, but from the very root fact that I am the one who is creating my own universe every moment and recreating it every other moment. And therefore, automatically, the love, sharing, compassion comes out. So, karunai, kadal, perugi is an automatic aspect of the all-inclusive nature that spirituality is. There's no I and you. You are me. So I alone am. There's nothing else other than I. That is the kind of inclusivity we are talking about. So then where is the room for tolerance, etc.? Tolerance comes only when you have the other. So tolerance is not a great virtue. Many other religions speak of religious tolerance. Why the hell would you need religious tolerance when you don't have another? You have included everything and everybody into you. So then there's no room for tolerance in an all-inclusive nature. Who is the other to tolerate? But the second line also talks about kaadhalinaal urugi. So in our day-to-day activity, we have to step down from that Advaitic truth of all is one. And then you see another. Then all that you have is you fall in love with them. Kadal. Kaadhalinaal urugi. You melt. The Panchabhuta, solid earth, becomes liquid water by melting and starts flowing. But solid is rigid. You don't want that. So kaadhalinaal urugi, love melts you. You fall in love. You melt in love. And then don't stop there. You have moved from one Panchabhuta, Bhumi, to apaha, that is earth, to water, solid to liquid. Then the next is energy. And use that energy to transform the liquid further to gas or vayu, air. And then you do not even have volume as you had in the case of a fixed volume as you had in the case of the liquid. So it's free to expand. It's become even more subtle than the solid, liquid and the energy. That's the fourth Panchabhuta. And kadal, the love, can make you go even beyond to akasha, the subtlest of the Panchabhutas, space itself, or the space-time parlance of kala, gagana, akasha. Tvam bhumi rapo nalo nilo nabaha. That nabaha is the akasha, the sky, the space, the space-time. Mahakala is right here. And then you go beyond the five Panchabhutas. Then you go beyond the Muladhara, Swadhisthana, Manipura, Anahata and the Vishuddhi, which are still in the realm of the Panchabhutas or the materialistic realms, to the Agnya Chakra of Parvati, which is beyond elements. And then that sublimates into the Sahasrara of nothingness, Kali and Kala. The black, dark matter to the dark energy. And then he talks of kanni Tamil. That is, kanni Tamil is the sweet language Tamil, which, as I said, is the father of all languages of the entire world of humanity. And chollinaal, inidhunai, anu-dhinam. Ini is again inip, sweetness. And inidhunai, anu-dhinam, every day. So this is the second and final set of 4 Entaro mahanubhavalu in Tyagaraja's words. In one of his Pancha Kritis, he says, Entaro mahanubhavalu, andariki ma vandanamu. So this is śuddhā-nanda Bharati's second sample of 4 Entaro Mahanubhavalu, great persons, role model singers that our poet of the day refers to and offers vandanam in this lovely poem. Adi Shankaracharya, you all know, the one who resurrected Sanatana Dharma in general and Advaita in particular. Tayumanavar, who became a mother in even a literal sense. Subtly speaking, all of us are mothers, irrespective of our gender. But this great, respectable man became a mother to help a woman bear her child through the labor pains. Tayum Anavar, who a respectable man who can become a mother as well. His songs. And Arunagiri-nadar. Aruna, we know, the dawn, reddish hue, the charioteer of the sun that I talked about last time. Giri, the mountain, Nadar, the Lord. This Arunagiri-nadar is a great poet who sung the Tirupugar and many other lovely songs on Subramanya Tattva. And Vallalar, a great poet himself as well. Just like the darkness dispelling, that is Guru. Darkness, Gu. Dispelling, Ru. So just like the darkness dispelling, Guru, gem. So a gem reflecting the light of Brahman is the Atman. So just like the darkness dispelling gem or mani, Guru Mani, Shankara. So just like the darkness dispelling gem, Adi Shankaracharya, and the dear Tayumanavar, and the great poet Arunagiri-nadar, and of course Arul Jyoti Vallal, a reference, as I said earlier, to the 19th century saint poet, spiritual philanthropist. Philanthropists, we usually talk about those who give money or charity in the form of materialistic things. But here is a spiritual philanthropist who lived just a couple of 100 years back. Commonly known as Vallalar. Vallal means a philanthropist and R is again a suffix for respect. Who attained maha-samadhi into light just prior to the birth of our poet of the day, śuddhā-nanda Bharati. So the influence was really great, but Vallalar's influence remains even today. He sublimated into light, and that light occupies the hearts of all his devotees. They're oceans of compassion, all these 4. Be it Arunagiri-nadar, be it Vallalar, be it Tayumanavar, or Adi Shankaracharya or Guru Mani Shankara as he refers to. All these 4, they're oceans of compassion overflowing, karunai, kadal, perugi, melting in their love for you, O nothingness. Kaadhalinaal, urugi, sang of you sweetly, inipoda or inidhunai, each day, anu-dhinam, in chaste Tamil words, kanni Tamil chollinaal, like a virgin. I also wish to sing in the same way as Shankara, the same way as Tayumanavar, the same way as Arunagiri-nadar, and in the same way as Vallalar, apart from the 4 other Nayanmars referred to in the Anupallavi. overflowing with compassion, hearts melting with your love. How did the great Guru Shankara, the dear Thayumanavar, Arunagirinathar, and Vallalar sing sweetly of you in chaste Tamil every day? I too would like to sing like that. Oh, my own nothingness, Shiva. Whenever we talk of Hindu saints, one of my favorite Carnatic blogger, Sujaji's mind almost always jumps to poetry and music, and so does mine. She goes on to exemplify while describing this very song, be it Narada from mythical times, the author of the Bhakti Sutras, remember, Valmiki from Vedic times. Narada is always with his tambura, and Valmiki, the most ancient poet of humanity. The Arvas, roughly the 6th to 9th century AD. The Nayanmars, roughly 5th to 10th century ADs, because there are 63 of them, unlike the 12 Arvas, who are just spread out over 400 years. These Nayanmars are spread out over about 600 years. Adi Shankaracharya in the 8th century, so he was a contemporary of some of the Nayanmars, and therefore his inclusion right after the Anupallavi reference to 4 Nayanmars, the fifth one, the first one in the charanam, but the fifth one in the song is Adi Shankara, 8th century. Then, of course, many who have not been mentioned in this song, like Namdev in the 14th century, much later, Purandaradasa, whose songs we have heard vasanthi-mā singing earlier, the 15th century. Annamacharya was also around the same time, probably a little earlier. Mirabai in the 15th century again. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu again in the 15th century. What a lovely century. All around in the south, north and east. Purandaradasa, Mirabai and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Great apostles of bhakti and songs. Tulasidas, again a little later, maybe in the 16th century. Tukaram in the 17th century. And of course the Trimurtis then start. Tyagaraja in the 18th century. The list is endless. We associate so many of our most important saints with songs. That is the beauty of Sanatana Dharma. The list of poet, musicians, saints, it's somewhat similar to the Sufis too. The list of poet, musicians, saints is indeed so long and intimidating, says Suja, that any devotional poet, musician would be struck with a sense of inadequacy. How did they write such beautiful poetry that centuries afterwards we still talk of them with awe, apart from singing them, of course? Because many of us can't sing, we talk like me. How did they sing such that God himself descended to bless them? As legends tell us, that's basically your own Atma taking a form outside you and showcasing yourself to you. How did they create music which leaves us so spellbound even after hundreds of years after they were first sung? Even when the world has changed so much from the world in which that music was originally created centuries ago, a poet-composer of today has much to live up to, which is what Vasanthi-mā's song Choice of Today is all about. How did they sing? Śuddhā-nanda Bhārati wonders, I wish to sing in the same way. He appeals. He goes on to say, overflowing with compassion, heart melting with your love. How did they sing sweetly of you in chaste Tamil every day? Kavi-yogi, maha-rśi Sri śuddhā-nanda Bhārati was born as Venkata Subramanyam. Śuddhā-nanda was not his original name. Some people say it was given by his grandpa. Some people say it was given by his cousin. Some people say it was given by his friend. But the maha-rśi, kavi-yogi titles were given by the Shankaracharya of Sringeri. And the reason for the śuddhā-nanda name is obviously the pure bliss that he was always engaged in thanks to his spirituality. But his original name, which his parents gave him, was Venkata Subramanyam. By the way, this is a very common name in Tamil Nadu, and you may also recollect my discourse last week in which I had exposed the oneness of Venkata and Subrahman, I am. Subramanyam. Yes, Venkata and Subramanyam, the Perumal and the Muruga, one and the same. I had given a very long discourse on that, so I'll not get back into that. Venkata Subramanyam is the name of many of my own friends and classmates as well, and some students too. Born in Tamil Nadu, this Venkata Subramanyam, who became śuddhā-nanda bhārati on May the 11th, 1897, as the fourth child, 2 sons and 1 daughter his parents had before śuddhā-nanda, or rather Venkata Subramanyam, was born. As the fourth child of an educated, devout and affluent Telugu Brahmin couple. This is the greatness of Tamil Nadu. It gets in so many people of great caliber from other states and provides an environment in which they can blossom. And that's the reason for Tamil Nadu being such a successful state, cosmopolitan. Unfortunately, certain parts like Chennai are losing that today. But due to xenophobia, you might say. But it's this bringing in of the best from around the world which made USA such a great country, which made Bangalore such a great city, and Tamil Nadu such a great state. So yes, these were a Telugu Brahmin couple who gave birth to Venkata Subramanyam, Jatadhara Iyer and Srimati Kamakshi. Tamil sounding names, but many Telugu people settled in Tamil Nadu have those Tamil sounding names, and I am aware of some of my own students from the past. So the initial patriotic exposure for śuddhā-nanda bhārati or Venkata Subramanyam was through one of his elder brothers who was a lawyer and a supporter of the freedom struggle. But the younger brother in question was to go way, way beyond his motivator. Yes, Venkata Subramanyam went way beyond his elder brother in the freedom struggle as well as in his knowledge and wisdom in executing his creativity. Yes, śuddhā-nanda was drawn to spirituality and devotion from an early age. His maternal great uncle, Purnānanda, taught him yoga, especially after his father died and his mom moved along with him to their house. Because he lost his father when he was still very young and went on to stay with his mother at his maternal uncle's home. His uncle was also a distinguished lawyer like his dad and hoped that his nephew would follow in his footsteps. He was even planning to send him abroad for this. But the young man was drawn towards religion more than law. So though it caused conflict at home, slowly his family came to accept his path. But he did not continue his formal education, and after that he became a school teacher and then an editor. He also supported and contributed to the nationalistic cause as well as to various social causes. But it was to spirituality that he was mainly drawn. He continued his studies of the different religions, including Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, and Jainism. And he practiced all of them too. He already excelled in Tamil. To add to that, he studied different European languages like English, Latin, French, and German. śuddhā-nanda bhārati had the privilege of meeting and working with many great spiritual and nationalistic leaders of those times, including Gandhiji, Subramanya Bharati, whose songs vasanthi-mā has sung for us, like Chinanjali Kiliye, VVS Iyer, Srinivasa Iyengar, Aurobindo, Tilak, Bal Gangadhar Tilak, that is of the Lal Pal fame, Kalki, Shirdi Sai Baba, Ramana Maharshi of Tiruvannamalai, and many others. A prolific writer, śuddhā-nanda Bhārati wrote both prose and poetry in Tamil, English, and French, by the way. Most of his works are in Tamil, but there's a sizable amount of books and works, poems in English and French as well. Many of them being translations of great philosophers of Europe. He also translated works from various languages to Tamil. His most important work, according to many great literatures, was Bharata Shakti Mahakavyam, which I said even Gandhiji claimed to be the modern Mahabharata. So he spent 20 years in Aurobindo's ashram in a vow of silence, as I mentioned earlier, during which time his output was prolific. See, when we are dumb, our eyesight becomes very good. When we become blind, our hearing becomes very good. And when we are silent, our creativity becomes prolific. So after our independence from British India, when it was safe to move out of Puducherry, Maharishi kavi-yogi śuddhā-nanda Bhārati in 1947, that is, finally brought an end to his vow of silence in a free India, Bharat. After that, he traveled widely within and outside free Bharat, giving discourses. Yes, he traveled abroad too. He propagated what he called the Sama Yoga, the yoga of equality. He believed that it's the synthesis of yoga and science which will take mankind forward. He established yoga centers and a school at Sholapuram, especially for very poor kids. And there are videos of these children at the time of his death or Mahasamadhi, the kind of purity with which they offer devotional songs to the Guru who is lying in his mortal coils is amazing. Nobody needs to tell them to discipline. The discipline is inbuilt in them. These are very poor children who are from families where education has never reached even their parents, grandparents. They're the first generation being exposed to education. And look at the lovely way in which he and his trained teachers have transformed those kids. So Sholapuram, where the school is there, is also where he lived the last years of his life in an ashram kind of a scenario, right adjacent to the school. He passed away on 7th March 1990, right after his Kanakabhishekam in 1987. So I'll finally end with the reading of a newspaper article by Sri P.G. Sundararajan, which appeared in the immediate aftermath of this Mahasamadhi of Śuddhā-nandaji 31 years ago. So let me read this from my iPad. Yes. The article is titled The Life and Beliefs of Śuddhā-nanda Bhārati, The Path to Spiritual Communism. See, almost all youngsters have been through this phase of communism. And then they realize that the communism, the way it was propagated by Marx, Lenin, Stalin, etc., and today's China and Russia, and most of Eastern Europe, where it has vanished, and finally in India, where except for West Bengal, where it's already vanished, and Kerala to large extent, and parts of Tamil Nadu, it doesn't exist. But when it becomes spiritual communism, that's what Sanatana Dharma is all about. And that's what even our friend Śuddhā-nanda Bhārati was all about. So let's see what this particular writer, P.G. Sundararajan, has to say about Śuddhā-nanda Bhārati. He says, to Śuddhā-nanda Bhārati, who passed away in the 97th year on March 7, writing in general and poetry in particular, was a tool for propagating his religious philosophy based on universal religion. A prolific writer, he had published more than 300 books in English, Tamil, French, and other languages, preaching yoga as a means for a fuller life. He had been initiated into the practice of yoga even in his boyhood by his grandfather's brother, who was himself looked upon as a saint because of his experiences with the sages in the Himalayas and scholars in Varanasi. Keeps coming again and again, Kashi. Kashika Puradisha Kalana Bhairavam Bhaje. Kala Bhairavam Bhaje. Adi Shankaracharya. Bharati's family in Madurai and later in Shivaganga was deeply religious, and the way of life at home supplied the background for his spiritual development. Youngest of a family of 4 children, 3 boys and 1 girl, he was originally named Venkata Subramaniam. He frequented temples and joined bhajan groups singing the praise of the gods. Inspired by the teachings of his grand uncle Purnananda, the boy declined the offer of adoption by a rich uncle and chose to follow the path of austerity to realize God. At school, he neglected his lessons and wrote poetry. Chided by the teacher, the boy left school and wandered about aimlessly when he encountered another teacher who helped his spiritual evolution. This teacher, Jnana Siddha, explained to the boy that while religions divided mankind, yoga was common to all, and that through yoga alone one could get at the fundamental truth of life. And hence the International Yoga Day, launched by the United Nations, has been accepted by almost all of the countries in the world. So quickly, one of the fastest resolutions to be moved after the proposal by Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji in his first tenure. The boy was struck by the accounts of the life of saints the teacher narrated and determined to know more about them by visiting various places of pilgrimage. Śuddhā-nanda's sojourn at school had one saving grace. He learned the greatness of the Tamil language and literature at the feet of the Tamil Pandit, Deva Shikhamani, who was a contemporary and colleague of savants like Mahavidwan, Meenakshi Sundaram Pillai, and Arumuga Navalar. The Pandit encouraged him in his literary efforts, and soon the boy began to compose innumerable poems which paved the way for his significant contribution to the growth of the Tamil Isai movement later in his life. The boy himself wanted to become a sannyasin and renounce the world. Consequently, he refused to marry and buried himself in the study of religion and philosophy. He was forced to continue his studies through his mind, though his mind was elsewhere. After undergoing training in teaching at a Christian missionary institution like me, I went to the Seventh-day Adventist High School and later St. Joseph's College. Before that, Margaret School was my kindergarten, where I, of course, got double promotions, and so I wasn't there for much longer than most other students. Śuddhā-nanda was employed as a teacher in Kattuputtur near Madurai. He liked the job, for the place was near Nerur, where the Samadhi of Sadashiva Brahmendra, again a great saint whose song vasanthi-mā has presented to us earlier, was situated in Nerur. And I had put up the map of Nerur also in that video, if you might remember. You can check that out later. I'll link it at the end. So Śuddhā-nanda Bharati used to visit the samadhi of Sadashiva Brahmendra. Of course, he was still Venkata Subramaniam at that point. Samadhi often and spent hours in contemplation. So apart from having met saints in flesh and blood, he's also been at the samadhi of great savants. He had the opportunity of meeting many religious persons who visited the samadhi. He spent most of his time composing songs exuding bhakti. He had already imbibed the ideals of Christianity during his training at Pasumalai and sought to identify the common principles which were the basis of various religions. Yes, Ramakrishna Paramahamsa also did that, to identify the commonality between all religions. What is the very basic essence? And that's what the swan does, to take the milk out of a mixture of milk and water, right? The very essence, the ghee of the cow. He also studied Islam later. Śuddhā-nanda studied Islam later, like again Paramahamsa Ramakrishna, and composed a long poem expounding the greatness of the faith. Despite his preoccupation with religious life, he did not neglect his profession as teacher. He, however, preferred the open spaces to the classroom and taught the wonders of nature to the students in the open air. While at Pasumalai, he involved himself in the activities of the missionaries and addressed a conference on the teachings of Jesus Christ. I used to love my Bible classes in Seventh-day Adventist. Yes, we used to have it as an actual subject and have all exams as for the regular subjects. So, he arranged to stage a play on the life of Jesus and also composed a poem on Jesus, which the Reverend Popley, who happened to attend the conference, liked very much and arranged for its publication. His interest in Christianity very nearly led to his being converted to the faith, as it happens with anybody who tries to interact with Christian missionaries. Happening to listen to the lectures of the Puri Shankaracharya, who was visiting Madurai at that time, Śuddhā-nanda held fast to his own faith and even engaged himself in a debate where he declared that one could admire Christ without becoming a Christian. Yes. He also disputed the assumption that India would soon become a Christian country. He used all the experience gained thus in inculcating the principles of higher life in the students in his charge. Śuddhā-nanda's involvement with spiritual life became more intense day by day as he had the opportunity of meeting many saints. Swami Brahmananda, the Avadhuta of Sendamangalam, taught him the meaning of the Brahma Sutra, one of the three Prashnatrayis, and Viveka Chudamani of Adi Shankaracharya. And therefore, the reference to Adi Shankaracharya in this song by Śuddhā-nanda Bharati that you just heard vasanthi-mā sing. He learned the more intricate yogasanas from Swami Anandagiri. He was also attracted to Swami Vedagiri, who was a treasure house of spiritual insight. Looks like he's met more saints than I have in my life. I've met hundreds of them, literally. He had thus mastered the implications of the Vedantic way of life while he was only 27. A notable turning point in his life was his meeting Mahatma Gandhiji in Chennai, that time called as Madras by the British, at the residence of Srinivasa Iyengar. He talked to him and understood the principles on which he stood, the ahimsa, non-violent way of freedom struggle. The result was his emergence as a nationalist besides being a spiritual yogi, somewhat like Aurobindo, you could say. He took to wearing khadi, which made the school authorities and officials view him with suspicion. He organized processions when the Mahatma was arrested in 1922, and this caused the authorities to regulate his work as a teacher, as they felt he was indulging in subversive activities. He refused to abide by the conditions imposed and resigned his job. For a while, he wandered about in the Kolli hills, Kollimalai as they say, where he again met Swami Brahmananda and Jnana-siddha. He felt as if recharged with additional spiritual energy by these encounters. Invited by the founder of the National High School at Devakotai, śuddhā-nanda spent a few years there, engaging himself in rural service on the lines of the Mahatma's teachings. Meanwhile, he completed his work on yoga in couplets on the pattern of the Kural, the Tirukural of Tiruvalluvar. Very popular, as you know. So this Tamil work of śuddhā-nanda Bharati in the pattern of Kural, but on yoga, like the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, was later translated into English by the same person, śuddhā-nanda Bharati himself. And when he was thinking of starting a new school on the Gurukula pattern, where he could teach the students yoga and meditation, VVS Iyer invited him to join his Gurukulam at Sherma Devi as its educational advisor. śuddhā-nanda dedicated himself to the service of the ashram and spent many fruitful days with Iyer when they used to discuss great writers like Kamban, Valmiki, both the writers of Ramayana in Tamil and Sanskrit respectively, Kalidasa, Homer and others. What a spread. śuddhā-nanda also helped Iyer to edit his journal, bhārati. He had meanwhile completed his epic in Tamil, Bharata Shakti Mahavakyam, and Mahakavyam rather, that I already told Gandhiji loved so much, excerpts from which he used to read out to Iyer. This happened even on the day Iyer and his daughter left for the Kalyan Falls, never to return in 1925. Iyer felt that the work should be published soon and even an English version also be brought out. This long poem occupies the pride of place among the yogi's numerous works. He was awarded the Rajaraja Cholan Prize of ₹1,00,000 in those days by the Tanjavur Tamil University for it when he was 91 years old. This magnum opus consists of 5 cantos in nearly 5,000 stanzas each, with a total of more than 25,000 lines. The composition is in various metrical patterns, most of them 4-line stanzas. It envisages a spiritual utopia, expounding the entire range of the Indian cultural heritage, from the ancient Vedic age to the strife-torn times of the present day. It seeks to spell out a scheme for the resurgence of spiritual socialism for humanity. The narration begins with the supreme power creating a new world. A man-woman pair of Manu and Mati are the progenitors of a new race of human beings, among whom both good and evil forces arise. Prince Shuddhan, who is taught the principles of governance by Bharata Rishi, is sought to be duped and killed by Kali, his jealous uncle. In the ensuing battle, Shuddhan defeats Kali's forces and restores peace. More trouble is in store for Shuddhan as Kali intermittently succeeds in disrupting life in the kingdom. Shuddhan loses Gauri, his wife, in an encounter with the enemy. Despite his victories, Shuddhan desires to forsake mundane life, declaring no political creed or religious dogma has saved humanity from wars. a universalized soul life, a yogic life, is the remedy, and to fulfill this, I shall do tapasya on the Himalayas. He leaves the kingdom and wanders about, looking for saints, searching for truth, and gaining knowledge and yogic experience from the great men he meets. He visits places of pilgrimage connected with all the religions of the world and learns the basic truth underlying devotion to God. Meanwhile, the kingdom is assailed by insurgency. Kali, with his evil forces, conquers the country. A set of yogis raise the flag of rebellion, and peace is restored. Thereafter, the affairs of the kingdom are managed by yogis who, under Shuddhan, reminds me of Yogi Adityanath in Uttar Pradesh, who is brought back, Shuddhan is brought back, spread the gospel of perfect life in tune with the inner spirit. The people hail victorious Shuddhan, who proclaims his future plans to create a world without divisions and strife. The lives of great men and their teachings are interwoven into the main narration in the form of stories told by Bharata Rishi to Shuddhan. Epics like the Ramayana are expounded to enable Shuddhan to choose the righteous path in life. Swami Shivananda Saraswati, my Paramaguru, conferring the title of maha-rśi on śuddhā-nanda Bhārati, wrote, we find in it the life and teachings of all saints, prophets, heroes, the essence of all religions and yogas set in an allegorical background. Bharata Shakti is indeed the new Bible of regenerated humanity. Gandhiji calls it another Mahabharata, and Sri Aurobindo calls it the voice of India. It is a guide for all nations, a book for all ages, which every seeker must study. I should too. The first complete edition of this Tamil epic was brought out in 1948 on the 55th birthday of the kavi-yogi, as he came to be known thereafter. As a writer, śuddhā-nanda Bhārati experimented with every literary form. Though poetry was his forte, he has written several novels in Tamil and has translated the works of Victor Hugo, notably Les Miserables and The Man Who Laughs. Among the famous English poems he has rendered into Tamil is Francis Thompson's Hound of Heaven. Individual discipline, devotion towards God, patriotism, and many attributes of a morally superior life form the theme of his novel, anu-dhinam. His songs, published under the title Sangeetanjali, provided the repertoire for many a musician. He has also written a book on dance. What a breadth! Entitled Natananjali. Maybe I recommend my daughter to read that. 72 compositions in the 72 mela-kartā ragas add a new dimension to his contribution to music. All the original set of ragas from which all other ragas are derived, the 72 mela-kartā. I talked about the Venkatamaki system, another Dikshita from Karnātaka who classified this as a contract with the king. I talked about it in detail last time. You can check that out. And Shuddhā-nanda sang in each and every one of those 72 mela-kartā ragas. Several French works are part of the considerable corpus of his creative effort. No attempt seems to have been made so far to prepare a detailed bibliography of his output. Hopefully it's been done in the 30 odd years since then. After this article, after the passing away of V.V.S. Iyer, along with his daughter at the waterfalls, Shuddhā-nanda moved over to Tanjavur, where he busied himself in the constructive rural work while editing a journal, Samarasa Bodhini. His close association with national leaders and freedom fighters in the course of his work in the villages often led to his being under the surveillance of the authorities for imagined offences of sedition. He took an active part in the Madras Congress session in 1927, where he sang some national songs composed by him for the occasion. Soon he lost interest in politics and determined to devote his life for the institution of a yoga samaj, much like Aurobindo again. His speech at the Tirunelveli district conference, where he shared the platform with Satyamurthy and V.O. Chidambaram Pillai, was the last political one. The yogi, śuddhā-nanda Bhārati, that is, studied Buddhism and Jainism for a while and went to have darshan of Ramana Maharshi at Tiruvannamalai. His sojourn at the ashram gave him spiritual impetus. Who wouldn't it give? So many people who've been influenced positively by their association, even for a few moments with Ramana. From Ramanashramam to Puducherry, then known as Pondicherry by the French, was a natural transition. His life as a yogi found fulfillment under Sri Aurobindo and the mother, both of them were around at that time, about whom he has written in many of his works. 22 years of his stay in Aurobindo ashram saw the efflorescence of the poet as a yogi. A meeting with Shivananda Saraswati completed the process. Swami Shivananda invited him to preside over several conferences of the Divine Life Society. He visited, and my grandfather has attended some of them too, Swami Saravana Bhavananda. He visited several foreign countries to give lectures. He was one of the representatives to the World Peace Conference in Berlin. He broadcast many talks over the radio in the Soviet Union. At a reception in Geneva, he answered many questions and concluded, "Man spoke to mankind. The voice of man did not touch human hearts. Prophets spoke, but man made religions around their names and lived a divided life of oppositions. With all his moon-hitting attempts, man cries for peace and peace," whereas that's the most basic thing even dogs have if they want to enjoy their dinner. After the world tour, the yogi retired to the Himalayas for contemplation for a while. Vadalur beckoned him, and inspired by the ideals of Saint Ramalinga, he consented to head the Shuddha Sanmarga Nilayam. After a year or two, he left the place to found Samayoga Samaj, his dream for many years. He organized the Samaj in Madras at Adyar to train pure yogis for the spiritual, cultural, and humanitarian services, to build up a collective life of souls dedicated to purity, unity, and divinity, to spread the gospel of perfect life, and to cultivate Bharata Shakti, which is the dynamic force of sages and saints, and to establish spiritual socialism. After nearly a decade of this penultimate experiment, śuddhā-nanda Bhārati returned to his native place, Shivaganga, near which, at Soravaram, he established another ashram, which he called Tavakkudil. He was very active till a few months before he breathed his last. Shri śuddhā-nanda Bhārati Maharaj ki Jai. Guru Brahma Guru Vishnu Guru Devo Maheshwara Guru Sakshat Param Brahma Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Ajnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitamena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Aneka Janma Samprapta Karma Bandha Vidahini Atmajnana Pradhanena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Mannatah Shri Jagannatho Madguru Shri Jagadguru Mamatma Sarvabhutatma Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Brahmanandam Paramasukadam Kevalam Jnanamurtim Dvandvatitam Gagana Sadrusham Tattvamasthyadiraksham Ekam Nityam Vimalamachalam Sarvadi Sakshibhutam भावातीतं त्रिगुणरहितं सद्गुरुं तं नमामि ध्यानमूलं गुरोर्मूर्तिपूजामूलं गुरोपदं मन्त्रमूलं गुरोर्वाक्यं मोक्षमूलं गुरोर्कृपाम् आदिगुरु अद्वैत गुरु आनंद गुरु ॐ चित् गुरु चिद्गण गुरु चिन्मय गुरु ॐ जय गुरु शिव गुरु हरि गुरु राम जगद्गुरु परम गुरु सद्गुरु श्याम जय गुरु शिव गुरु हरि गुरु राम जगद्गुरु परम गुरु सद्गुरु श्याम ॐ मङ्गलं ॐकारमङ्गलं गुरुमङ्गलं गुरु पादमङ्गलं जय गुरुदेव ॐ श्री गुरुभ्यो नमः दत्तात्रेय 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 पाहि मां दत्तगुरु 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 रक्ष माम् ॐ श्री दक्षिणामूर्तये नमः पूज्याय राघवेन्द्राय सत्यधर्मरताय च भजतां कल्पवृक्षाय नमतां कामधेनवे दूर्वादिध्वान्तरवये वैष्णवेन्दिवरेन्दवे श्रीराघवेन्द्र गुरवे नमो अत्यन्तदयाळवे ॐ साई श्री साई जय जय साई ॐ साई श्री साई जय जय साई श्री सद्गुरु साईनाथ महाराज की जय। श्री गुरुध्यान स्तोत्रम विश्वसारतंत्रम सर्वधर्मस्वरूपाय सर्वसांप्रदाय सर्वोपाय सर्वगुरु ऋषि मातृ पितृ देव देवी स्वरूपाय श्री 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 रामकृष्ण परमहंस देवाय नमो नमः। ॐ हंस हंसाय विद्महे परमहंसाय धीमहि तन्नो हंसः प्रचोदयात्। जय गुरु श्री शुद्धानंद भारती महाराज कवि योगी नमो नमः नमो नमः नमो नमः महर्षि नमो नमः।